Visitors thought that she was just a waitress in the diner and insulted her. But when a young boy stood up for her, everything changed. This story is not just about the veteran commission person, but about the inconspicuous heroism and courage which no one expected. Before we start, tell us where you look and do not forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we have something special for you. 32-year-old Sarah Thompson was a veteran. She returned home after 2 business trips to Iraq. She bravely served and saved the lives of soldiers coming into the coming during a sudden attack. But the time spent in Iraq left noticeable scars on her face. These scars were from the explosion of a roadside bomb near her unit. It was difficult not to notice the scars, and they often caused people a feeling of awkwardness. Returning home, Sarah faced many difficulties. She wanted to find a job and start life again, but it was not easy. Many employers did not dare to hire her. They could not see her scars further. Despite her skills and experience, she received a refusal to refuse. It upset Sarah. She knew that a lot could offer, but she was judged by appearance. After several months of attempts, Sarah found a job. This was not her first choice, but she was grateful for this opportunity. She got a job as a waitress in the local diner. The snack was in her small hometown. The owner was one of the few who was ready to give her a chance. Sarah was grateful for the work, although she was associated with certain difficulties. The snack was a busy place, popular among local residents and among visitors. People came here for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For Sarah, the snack was a new environment. She had to study quickly. She took orders, served food, and cleaned from the tables. It was hard work, but Sarah got used to difficulties. Her military training taught her to adapt and show perseverance. However, not everything in the diner was glad to her. Some visitors looked at Sarah with curiosity. Others felt embarrassed. They whispered and looked at her scars. Sarah felt their eyes on herself. Sometimes she felt lonely. It was not easy to ignore the whisper and views, but Sarah tried her best. At first, the diner staff was not sure of Sarah. They did not know her story. They saw only her scars. But as they worked with her, their attitude began to change. They saw how Sarah works hard. She always came on time and did her job well. Her stamina and devotion to the cause earned their respect. Despite the ambiguous reaction, Sarah remained a professional. She was polite with clients and focused on her work. Military training helped her remain calm and self-control. She knew how to cope with difficult situations. But inside, Sarah fought with her attitude to herself. She knew how others saw her, and it was difficult not to allow this to influence her. Sarah's family lived in the same city. They supported her and were proud of her. They knew how brave she was in Iraq. They encouraged her not to give up, even when it was difficult. Their support was a source of power for Sarah. She knew that she was not alone in her path. In her free time, Sarah visited therapy sessions. She talked about her experience in Iraq and about her present life. Therapy helped her cope with her emotions. She taught her how to combat stress and negative thoughts. Sarah found comfort in these sessions. They gave her a safe space for self-expression. Sarah also talked with other veterans. She joined the local support group. It was useful for her to talk with people who understood her experience. They shared stories and tips. The group has become an important part of Sarah's life. She reminded her that she was not alone in her struggle. The transition to civilian life was difficult for Sarah. She lacked partnership and order in the army. Civil life was different, more unpredictable, but Sarah was determined to succeed. She wanted to build a new life for herself. She knew that this would take time and effort. As Sarah was mastered in her work in the diner, she began to notice small changes. Some regular customers began to treat her warmer. They appreciated her friendly service. Some even asked about her service in the army. These conversations were rare but significant. They forced Sarah to feel that she was seen not only as a person with scars, Sarah also began to communicate more with her colleagues. She told several stories about her service in Iraq. Her colleagues listened with interest and respect. They were impressed by her courage. Sarah's openness helped build a stronger relationship at work. She felt more accepted and valued. However, there were difficult days. Some visitors were frankly rude or dismissive. They released comments on her scars or asked for another waiter. These moments were painful for Sarah, but she remembered the advice of her therapist. She focused on her breath and remained calm. She refused to allow the negativity to break her. Sarah was constant balancing. She had to cope with her emotions, performing her work. It was not easy, but she was determined to cope. She knew that every day is a step forward. Over time, Sarah's confidence grew. She began to look at her scars differently. They were not just a reminder of pain, they were symbols of her survival and strength. She faced difficulties and became stronger. This awareness gave Sarah. It helped her accept her personality of the veteran and the person who survived. The story of Sarah is the story of courage and perseverance. She overcame many obstacles and continued to go forward. Her path was not only in search of work, it was about finding yourself and your place in the world. She knew that her scars did not determine her. She was determined by her actions and character. Continuing to work in the diner, Sarah did not lose hope. She believed that changes are possible. She hoped that once people would see her as she is, and not just her scars. Until then, she will continue to move forward, step by step. The snack, where Sarah worked, has always been lively. It was a favorite place for local residents and tourists. People came here to drink morning coffee and remained for lunch. On weekends, their families were filled with cabins, and friends were going to eat. In the air, the sounds of conversations and the ringing of dishes were hung. Sarah got used to the bustle. She knew regular customers by names and their usual orders. The diner was in some way comforting. He gave her a sense of goal and structure, similar to what was in her army. Despite the lively atmosphere, Sarah often felt a stranger. Her presence was the subject of curiosity. New visitors whispered or looked at her. Their eyes lingered on her scars. She felt their awkwardness, but tried not to pay attention to it. Sarah focused on her work and tried to ignore her eyes with all her might. Her colleagues became more and more friendly. At first, they were not sure of her. They did not know what to say or how to behave. But over time, they saw her loyalty and strength. Sarah was hardworking and rarely complained. Her resistance deserved their respect. Sarah's manager, Tom, was a kind person. He appreciated her efforts and often praised her work. Tom understood that Sarah was faced with difficulties and tried to support her when he could. He urged staff to be inclusive and hospitable. This was of great importance for Sarah. One of the colleagues of Sarah, Jenna, became her friend. Jenna was talkative and sociable, the exact opposite of Sarah, but they got along well. Jenna admired Sarah's courage and often told her about it. She tried to involve Sarah in conversations and join events. This helped Sarah feel part of the team. Even with a growing support network, Sarah still had difficult days. Some visitors were frankly rude or dismissive. They released comments on her scars or asked for another waiter. These moments were heavy for Sarah. They reminded her of the difficulties that she faced in civilian life. Sarah remembered the advice of her therapist. She practiced breathing techniques to remain calm. She reminded herself that its value is not determined by the opinion of others. This attitude helped her to experience difficult times. The snack was the microcosm of the big world. She reflected the various views and ideas of people about veterans. Some visitors showed kindness and gratitude. Others were indifferent or even hostile. Sarah learned to cope with these various reactions with dignity. On one lively Saturday morning, it was especially crowded in the diner. Families had breakfast. The line at the tables was long. Sarah quickly moved, balancing with plates and filling the cups. She was in her element, concentrated and effective. Working, Sarah noticed a group of teenagers over a corner table. They laughed and joked loudly. Sarah came up to accept their order. One of the boys looked at her and grinned. His friends followed his example, whispering and pointing to her scars. Sarah felt a familiar injection of awkwardness. She took a deep breath and continued to accept the order. The boys ordered food but continued to release gross comments. Their words were offensive, but Sarah retained self-control. Nearby, the family watched what was happening. Parents looked at each other, not knowing whether it was worth interfering. Their little son, a boy named Ethan, watched his eyes wide open. He seemed to be confused by teenagers. Sarah finished accepting the order and went away. She still heard the laughter of the boys when she moved to the next table. Her heart was hard, but she did not want to show it. She faced the worst situations and knew how to stay strong. Jenna noticed this incident and went to Sarah. She smiled encouragingly and hugged her briefly. Jenna's support meant a lot for Sarah. It reminded her that she was not alone in the fight against prejudices. The rest of the day passed as in a fog. Sarah focused on her tasks, trying not to get hung up on a negative. She found consolation in small manifestations of kindness from her colleagues and some visitors. These moments reminded her that there was good in the world. At the end of her shift, Sarah sat down to rest. She was tired, but was grateful for the opportunity to work. The snack was not just work. It was a place where she restored her life. She knew that it would take time, but was determined to succeed. When Sarah was about to leave, she noticed that Ethan was watching her. He shyly waved to her and smiled slightly. Sarah smiled back, feeling how warmly spreading into her heart. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot for her. Ethan's parents approached Sarah before leaving. They thanked her for the service and expressed their support. Their words were sincere, and Sarah appreciated their kindness. It was such moments that made her way standing. The snack was a difficult place, but it was also a growth place. Sarah learned to navigate in her new life, day after day. She knew that she had a long way, but she was not alone. Every day it became stronger and more confident in herself and her abilities. Sarah's story is a story of stamina and hope. She overcame many obstacles and continued to go forward. Her path was not only in search of work, it was about finding yourself and your place in the world. She knew that her scars did not determine her. She was determined by her actions and character. Continuing to work in the diner, Sarah did not lose hope. She believed that changes are possible. She hoped that once people would see her as she is, and not just her scars. Until then, she will continue to move forward, step by step. On one busy Saturday, in a diner, I faced another test. The institution was crowded, the noise level was high. Families enjoyed their Sunday brunch, and the air was filled with the ringing of plates and cutlery. Sarah scurried between the tables, taking orders and giving food with her usual efficiency. Approaching the table by the window, she noticed a group of 4 men. They laughed loudly and seemed to be in a good mood. When Sarah went to their table to accept the order, she felt a change in their mood. One of the men looked at her and pushed his friend. They looked at each other, and Sarah prepared for what could happen. The man spoke in a mocking tone. He released a rude commentary on Sarah's scars, and his friends laughed. Their laughter was loud and sharp, cutting out the noise of the snack. Sarah felt that her face was on, but retained self-control. She focused on her breath, reminding herself that she needs to remain calm. The man continued his comments, each of which was humiliating than the previous one. Sarah felt her heart fell, but retained professionalism. She accepted their order and walked away, straightening her back and raising her head. Inside, she felt a mixture of anger and sadness. It was not easy to encounter such an open prejudice, but she refused to allow this to break her. Other visitors to the diner noticed this conversation. Some looked awkward, while others pretended that they saw nothing. Sarah's colleagues were busy with their tables and did not notice what happened. Sarah returned to the kitchen to make an order, using the moment to gather her thoughts. When she stood at the rack, Jenna approached her. Jenna saw the behavior of men and was clearly upset. She asked Sarah whether everything is in order with her, offering her support. Sarah nodded, grateful for Jenna's kindness. She took a deep breath and returned to the hall to continue her work. The men at the table continued to talk loudly, from time to time glancing toward Sarah. Their laughter acted on her nerves, but she remained focused on her tasks. She cleaned the tables, filled the drinks, and smiled at visitors who respect her. During the day, the voltage in the diner grew. More and more visitors have noticed the behavior of men, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. Sarah felt the severity of condemnation, but refused to allow this to break her. She came across much worse in Iraq and knew that she was stronger than their words. The manager Tom was aware of the situation. He was torn between the desire to intercede for Sarah and the need to take into account the expectations of other customers. He took Sarah aside and asked if everything was in order with her. Tom invited her to take a break, but Sarah shook her head. She wanted to finish her shift and not allow these men to drive her away. Continuing to work, Sarah noticed that Ethan, the boy, whom she had seen before, was watching what was happening. His eyes were widely revealed from anxiety and confusion. Ethan seemed to feel the injustice of the situation, and it bothered him. Sarah met his gaze and smiled encouragingly, trying to show that everything was in order with her. Men at the table became louder, their comments more and more arrogant. Sarah felt that her patience was running out, but she held on. She reminded herself the advice of her therapist and focused on maintaining calm. Laughter and mocking words were offensive, but they did not determine it. Finally, the men ended their food and asked for an account. Sarah went to their table ready to complete the operation and leave. When she gave them an account, one of the men released the last comment. It was a farewell attack, designed to humiliate it even more. Before Sarah managed to answer, Ethan got up from his table. The little boy silently watched, but could no longer be silent. He went to Sarah and stood next to her. His presence was unexpected and strong. Itan's parents watched with a mixed sense of pride and anxiety. They knew about the strong sense of the justice of their son and were not surprised by his actions. Itan looked at the men. His facial expression was serious and decisive. He spoke in a clear voice, addressing their behavior. Ethan reminded them that everyone deserves respect. He talked about the courage of such soldiers as Sarah, who were faced with dangers to protect others. His words were simple, but full of truth. Men were stunned by Itan's courage. They embraced awkwardly in their places. Their laughter disappeared. Silence reigned in the diner. All the eyes were turned to Itan and Sarah. The intercession of the boy changed the atmosphere. Visitors who were indifferent now looked at Sarah with different eyes. The severity of condemnation disappeared, replacing a sense of understanding. The manager Tom went to the table. He thanked Itan for his words and apologized to Sarah for the behavior of men. Tom assured Sarah that she was appreciated and respected in the diner. His support was sincere, and Sarah felt relief. The men paid the bill and left. Their bravado was broken by Itan's intercession. When they left, some visitors quietly slammed their hands, recognizing Itan's courage. Sarah felt warm in her heart, grateful for the unexpected ally. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Sarah continued her work with renewed vigor. Itan's actions reminded her of good in people. She knew that not everyone would be kind, but there are those who defend what is right. Having finished the shift, Sarah found time to thank Etan and his family. They changed her day, and she wanted them to know about it. Ethan smiled proudly, glad that he was able to help. Sarah came out of the diner with a lighter heart. She knew that the path would be difficult, but she was not alone. Every day she learned more about herself and others. Her scars were not just the marks of the past, but with symbols of her stamina and courage. Sarah was ready for everything that awaits her ahead, knowing that she had the strength to withstand everything. The next day, Sarah returned to the diner with a new sense of goal. The events of the previous day scrolled in her head, but she felt stronger. Etan's support was a turning point for her. This reminded her that there are people who see her scars further. When she entered the diner, she was met by familiar sounds and smells. It was a busy morning, like any other. Sarah put on an apron and started work, ready for everything that this day would bring her. Her colleagues warmly welcomed her, knowing what happened the day before. Jenna, in particular, wanted to know how Sarah feels. Sarah assured her that everything was in order with her, grateful for the support she received. The morning bustle began, and Sarah passed from table to table, taking orders and giving food. She focused on her tasks, allowing the rhythm of work to reassure her. Visitors' conversations filled the air, creating a comfortable background for her thoughts. Working, Sarah noticed that Ethan and his family entered the diner. They became regular customers, and Sarah fell in love with them. Ethan was a bright spot in her bottom, and his presence brought her comfort. Ethan waved Sarah when they sat down. She went to their table with a smile, ready to accept their order. Ethan's parents warmly welcomed her, expressing gratitude for her service. They were proud of Ethan's act and wanted Sarah to know that they support her. Ethan, burning with a desire to talk, asked Sarah about her army service. He was curious to find out about her experience and the difficulties that she faced. Sarah appreciated his interest and told several stories, trying to be light and positive. She spoke about the partnership between the soldiers and the feeling of the goal she experienced. While they were talking, Sarah noticed that other visitors were listening. Some nodded in understanding, while others seemed surprised by her stories. Sarah rarely talked about her past, but she felt comfortable with Etan and his family. Having accepted their order, Sarah continued bypass. The morning bustle was in full swing, and she moved quickly to keep up. Her colleagues worked with her. The team functioned as a well-functioning mechanism. During the morning, the thoughts of Sarah returned to Etan. His curiosity and kindness touched her deeply. She admired his courage and values that his parents instilled in him. You can rarely see such sympathy at such a young age. Later on the same day, it became quieter in the diner. The morning bustle ended, and visitors who come for lunch have not yet appeared. Sarah found a moment to catch her breath, grateful for a short lull. Standing by the rack, Sarah noticed that Ethan was watching her because of her table. He seemed immersed in his thoughts. His eyebrows were frowning in concentration. Sarah was wondering what he was thinking. Intrigued by the behavior of the boy, she decided to check whether they were all right, taking the opportunity to find out if Etan needed something. When she went to their table, Ethan raised his eyes. There was a decisive expression on his face. Etan's parents nodded encouragingly, feeling the determination of his son. Ethan took a deep breath and spoke. His voice was firm and confident. He wanted to contact visitors of the snack and share something important. Sarah was surprised but intrigued. She knew that Etan had a strong sense of justice and the desire to help others. She invited him to speak out, interested in what he wants to say. Ethan got up, attracting the attention of the closest visitors. In the snack, it became quieter when people noticed a boy standing at his table. Etan's parents watched with pride, knowing that their son wanted to share something significant. Ethan spoke of respect and understanding. He reminded everyone that people like Sarah, who served their country, deserve kindness and gratitude. His words were simple, but strong, echoing in the diner. He talked about the courage of the soldiers and the difficulties that they face after returning home. He talked about his admiration for Sarah and others similar to her, which every day show strength and resistance. While Ethan continued, silence reigned in the diner. Visitors listened carefully, touched by the sincerity of the boy. His words found a response from them, challenging their perception and prompting sympathy. Sarah was touched by the act of Ethan. His courage and kindness were obvious, and she felt a new sense of pride. She was grateful for his support and for the influence that he had. Ethan finished his speech, and the diner erupted with applause. Visitors clapped and welcomed, recognizing the wisdom and courage of the boy. Ethan's parents shone with pride, knowing that their son changed the situation. Sarah felt the warmth spilling over her heart, grateful for the friendship of Ethan. His act reminded her of the kindness of people and the power of sympathy. The atmosphere in the diner has changed. Visitors began to reflect on their behavior. Some expressed regret and apologized to Sarah. The manager Tom publicly recognized the courage of Sarah and thanked Ethan for his words. His support was sincere, and Sarah appreciated this gesture. This incident aroused talk about respect and sympathy. Visitors discussed the difficulties that veterans face and the importance of understanding their experience. The diner has become a place of awareness and acceptance, a symbol of change in society. As the lunch break continued, Sarah felt hope. Ethan's act inspired her and others. This was a reminder that kindness and sympathy could change the situation, even in small things. Sarah finished her shift with a lighter heart. She knew that her path would not always be easy, but she was ready for everything that was waiting for her ahead. Thanks to the support of her community and friends such as Ethan, she was determined to continue her journey. Ethan's act showed her the importance of upholding what is right. His courage and kindness were a source of inspiration, reminding her that changes are possible. When Sarah left the diner that day, she felt a new sense of goal. She knew that she was more than her scars and was ready to create a future filled with hope and connection. Her story was a history of stamina and courage, evidence of the power of sympathy and understanding. The day after Ethan's speech, the snack changed. A new atmosphere has appeared, warm and complete understanding. Coming visitors seem more attentive, more tactful. The influence of Ethan's words was preserved, changing how people interacted with Sarah and with each other. Sarah came to the diner, ready for a new working day. She felt optimism, the belief that changes were possible. The support of Ethan in society gave her a new sense of goal. Putting on the apron and preparing for the shift, Sarah noticed a small group of regular customers gathered at the entrance. They spoke quietly. Their faces were thoughtful. Sarah approached them, interested in their conversation. One of the visitors, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Harris, warmly welcomed Sarah. For many years he visited the diner and was known for his friendliness. Mr. Harris spoke with Sarah, expressing his admiration for Ethan's speech and the courage of Sarah. He said that Ethan's words made him think about his own behavior. Mr. Harris admitted that he did not always think about the difficulties that veterans face. He wanted to become better, to be more understanding and supporting. Sarah was touched by Mr. Harris's honesty. She thanked him for his kindness and assured him that his support means a lot for her. Their conversation was a reminder of what influence one person on society could have. Passing along the diner, Sarah noticed that other visitors were conducting such conversations. People thought about their attitude and the importance of sympathy. The diner has become a place of training and growth, a space where people could communicate and support each other. Jenna, a colleague of Sarah, approached her with a smile. She heard about the conversations taking place in the diner and was glad to change. Jenna admired Sarah's stamina and was proud to work with her. Sarah and Jenna continued to fulfill their duties together, giving food and communicating with visitors. The shift was tense, but among the staff and visitors, a sense of partnership reigned. The diner has become more than just a place where you can eat. She became the center of the community. During the day, Sarah noticed a new face at the rack. The young woman sat alone, looking around with interest. She seemed indecisive, as if she did not know whether it was worth approaching or not. Sarah decided to greet her, interested in the story of a stranger. The young woman introduced herself as Lisa. She was new in the city and found out about the diner from her friend. Lisa said that she was also a veteran who served in the Navy for several years. She was in the process of adaptation to civilian life and was looking for a sense of belonging. Sarah immediately felt a connection with Lisa. They talked about their experience in the Army, sharing stories and difficulties. It was nice to talk with a person who understood the unique problems of reintegration. Lisa mentioned that she had heard about Etan's speech and positive changes in the diner. She was inspired by the support of society and wanted to become part of it. Sarah was glad to hear this, knowing that the diner could become a hospitable place for Lisa. While they were talking, other visitors joined the conversation. They listened with interest to Lisa's story and offered their support. This was another example of how society unites, showing sympathy and understanding. The day continued with a constant flow of visitors. Sarah noticed more interactions between visitors. Conversations caused by Etan's speech. People were more open, more ready to listen and learn from each other. Tom, manager, proudly watched the changes. He went to Sarah at a quiet moment, expressing his gratitude for her presence in the diner. Tom admitted that Sarah played a key role in creating a favorable atmosphere, both her actions and her courage. Sarah appreciated the words of Tom, feeling satisfaction. She knew that the journey was not finished, but was proud of the progress achieved. The snack became the place of acceptance, where everyone was welcome guests. When the sun began to sit down, the snack was slowly empty. Sarah cleaned up, reflecting on the events of the day. She was grateful for the support received and for the connections that she established. This was a reminder that small actions could lead to significant changes. Before leaving, Sarah found time to thank Etan and his family who ended their food. Etan's parents expressed pride in their son, and Ethan shone with happiness. Sarah was grateful for their friendship and the positive influence that they had on society. Walking home, Sarah thought about the future. She knew that there would still be difficulties ahead, but she was ready for them. Thanks to the support of her community and friends such as Ethan, she felt the strength to change the situation. The story of Sarah was a story of stamina and hope. She ran into adversity and found power in the kindness of others. Her path was evidence of the power of sympathy and understanding, a reminder that everyone is able to change the situation. When the stars began to flicker in the night sky, Sarah felt peace. It was part of something more, a society that appreciated communication and support. Her scars were part of her story, but they did not determine her. She was more than her past, and she was ready to build a future, filled with hope and goal. The days went, and Sarah felt a growing sense of belonging to the diner. The changes caused by the speech of Etan continued to spread throughout society. At first, they thought he was just an old man getting his ID renewed. But when a U.S. Senator walked into the station an hour later, everything changed. This story isn't just about an old man. It's about the quiet strength and respect one man's silence inspired. Before we get started, tell us where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got something you won't want to miss. An ordinary city precinct went about its business. The city was famous for its efficiency, but also its heartlessness. The police station was buzzing with activity. Phones were ringing, People were talking. Officers were scurrying in and out. It was a place where everyone had a story to tell, but not everyone wanted to hear it. Viktor Vic Sokolov walked into the precinct. His gray hair, straight back, betrayed his military background and an old leather jacket decorated with badges and stripes from his years of service. Vic had come to renew his veteran's ID. He thought it would be a simple formality. As Victor entered, he noticed officers at their desks. They were deep in work, typing on their computers and talking on their phones. The noise in the station was constant, a mixture of voices and the hum of technology. Victor walked confidently, heading towards the reception desk with a firm step. Officer Dmitry Petrov was on duty at the counter, young and eager to impress. He saw Victor and nodded, his tone a mixture of professionalism and impatience. He was busy, and renewing Victor's ID seemed like another chore. Victor held out his ID. It was old and worn, the edges frayed and the colors faded. Officer Petrov looked at the card in bewilderment. He had never seen such an ID before. It seemed like something from another era, a relic of the past. Officer Petrov chuckled as he made a comment about the ID, comparing it to something from a forgotten era. He didn't understand the significance of the card. His words were meant as a joke, but there was a hint of disrespect in them. Other officers nearby heard him and joined in the laughter. Their laughter created an atmosphere of mockery. Victor stood silently. Despite the taunts, he remained calm. His silence was powerful, creating a gap between him and the officers. He did not respond to their laughter, but calmly asked to renew his ID. His voice was firm and unwavering. The officers' disdainful glances did not shake him. Victor's presence was strong, even though he said little. His demeanor spoke for itself. He was a man who had seen a lot in life, and he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The officers' taunts didn't hurt him. He had come here for a purpose, and he remained focused on his task. Officer Petrov, trying to maintain his composure, felt a slight uneasiness. There was something special about Victor. Even without understanding why, the officer felt that this was not a normal interaction. But his lack of experience prevented him from fully comprehending the situation. The station continued its work. Phones were ringing, officers were moving, the noise was not abating. Victor sat down in the waiting area. After talking with Officer Petrov, he silently watched the work of the station. His gaze moved from one corner to another, observing the controlled chaos. The other officers didn't know who Victor was. To them, he was just another man who needed an ID renewal. They didn't see the story in his eyes or hear the tales the stripes on his tattered jacket might tell. They were too busy with their own affairs to notice the significance of the man sitting quietly among them. Victor sat patiently, his composure unwavering. He had learned patience over the years of service. His military past had taught him the value of waiting, to remain calm even in chaos. He was used to being unnoticed, to operating in the shadows. As he waited, Victor thought about his past. He remembered the missions, the places he had been, the people he had served with. Every badge and patch on his jacket held a memory. They were reminders of the sacrifices he had made, the years he had spent serving his country. The officers continued to perform their duties, unaware of the quiet power in their midst. Victor's presence was unobtrusive but undeniable. Despite the initial ridicule, he remained calm. He was a man who did not seek attention but commanded respect by his mere presence. Officer Petrov returned to his duties, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. He didn't understand why Victor's presence affected him so. It was just another day, and Victor was just another man waiting for his ID to be renewed. But somewhere deep inside, the young officer sensed that there was more to this interaction than met the eye. Victor's silence spoke louder than words. He didn't need to defend himself or his past. His silence was a reminder that respect isn't always expressed in words. Sometimes it's an acknowledgement of the stories and experiences that others carry within them. The station continued to live its own life. Officers scurried back and forth. Conversations continued. The day went on. Victor's quiet presence remained a constant, a reminder that not all stories are told in words. Some stories are lived, woven into the very fabric of human existence. As the day wore on, the officers remained unaware of the significance of Victor's visit. They continued to perform their duties, focusing on the tasks at hand. But for Victor, this visit was more than just an ID renewal. It was a reminder of his past, of the years he had given to his country. Victor's silence was a choice. He didn't have to explain anything to anyone. He was content to wait, letting his actions speak for themselves. His silence was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It was a reminder that true respect is earned through years of service and sacrifice. Victor sat quietly in the waiting room. The room was buzzing with activity. Officers scurried past, papers rustled, phones rang incessantly. Victor was an island of calm amid the chaos, his patience unwavering. He had been through a lot in his life, and waiting was a small task compared to his past experiences. Victor kept his cool and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small vintage flip phone, its edges scuffed like his ID. Victor flipped it open and dialed the number from memory. He didn't need to look at his contacts. He knew the number by heart. The call was not local. It did not connect with a friend or family member nearby. Instead, the call went to the office of Senator Igor Novikov in Washington, D.C. Senator Novikov was known for his strong support of veterans. Victor had met him several times at events honoring those who had served. In his office, Senator Novikov was busy with business. Papers covered his desk, and his phone rang constantly. When he saw Victor's number on his phone, he paused. He knew Victor well enough to know that he would not call without a reason. Senator Novikov answered the phone. Victor's voice was calm and firm. He briefly explained his situation, mentioning the disdain he had experienced at the station. Senator Novikov listened carefully. He knew Victor's track record and respected him greatly. Realizing that an injustice might occur, Senator Novikov took immediate action. He made several calls himself, reaching out to people who could help. He knew that Victor deserved respect, and he was determined to make sure he got it. At the station, Victor remained seated. He watched the officers go about their business. He showed no signs of irritation or impatience. His calm presence was a silent statement of his strength and fortitude. Officer Petrov and his colleagues continued to work. They were unaware of the call Victor had made. To them, he was just another person waiting for his ID to be renewed. The station was still busy, and the officers were focused on their tasks. As he sat, Victor thought about the system he had served for so long. He had dedicated years to his country, seen the best and worst in people. His experiences had taught him the value of patience and persistence. He knew that sometimes respect had to be earned through quiet strength. The precinct was a place where stories often got lost in the shuffle. Victor's story was one of many, but it was an important one. He was a veteran who had given so much, and he deserved to be treated with dignity. His presence at the precinct was a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who served. Senator Novikov's calls set off a chain of events. He contacted his contacts in the military and local government. He knew that Victor's situation required a quick solution. His influence and dedication to veterans' rights were well known, and his calls carried weight. Victor remained patient. He showed no outward signs of anxiety or impatience. His demeanor was confident, his calm presence a testament to his character. He knew that Senator Novikov would help, and he trusted that he would take the necessary steps. Minutes passed, and the officers at the station continued their work. They were unaware of the quiet storm that was brewing. Victor was just another person waiting in the bustle of the station. Victor's call to Senator Novikov was more than a plea for help. It was a reminder of the bond that exists between those who serve and those who support them. Senator Novikov's swift action demonstrated the power of advocacy and the importance of standing up for what is right. In his office, Senator Novikov continued to make calls. He explained the situation to everyone he contacted, emphasizing the need for respect and understanding. His efforts were motivated by a deep respect for Victor and all veterans who served their country. Victor's patience was unwavering. He sat watching the proceedings of the station. He knew that change often took time, and he was willing to wait for the respect he had earned. His quiet strength was a reminder of the dignity that comes from a life of service. The station remained bustling. Officers moved from one task to another, unaware of the importance of the man sitting among them. Victor's presence was a quiet testimony to the stories that often go unheard, the sacrifices made by those who served in silence. As Senator Novikov's calls reached their intended recipients, the wheels of change began to turn. The people he contacted understood the importance of Victor's story. They recognized the need for respect and action, and they were willing to help. Victor remained a silent observer at the station. His patience was a powerful statement, a reminder that respect was earned through years of service and sacrifice. He did not seek attention or recognition. He simply wanted to be treated with the dignity he deserved. As the day went on, the officers at the station remained focused on their work. They were unaware of the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the quiet anticipation of change. Victor's presence was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones told without words. Senator Novikov's efforts were beginning to bear fruit. The people he had contacted began to act, setting plans in motion to resolve Victor's situation. His advocacy was a testament to the power of connections and the importance of standing up for those who had served. Victor had not waited in vain. His patience, his quiet strength, and his connections were working in his favor. He knew Senator Novikov's support would make a difference, and he trusted him to see it through. The precinct was a place where stories often went unheard, where the chaos of daily life obscured the personal experiences of those who passed through it. Victor's story was a reminder of the importance of listening, of recognizing the sacrifices made by those who had served. An hour passed. The usual bustle continued at the station. Phones were ringing, officers were moving quickly, papers were piling up. Victor remained patient, sitting quietly in the waiting room. He was calm, observing the world around him. His patience was a testament to his character, a quiet strength acquired over years of service. The atmosphere at the station began to change. The officers noticed commotion outside. A motorcade of cars appeared, forcing everyone to turn their heads. Senator Igor Novikov stepped out of the car. His unexpected appearance attracted everyone's attention. Accompanied by a small group of people, including a major with local military base, whispers spread inside the station. Officers exchanged glances, curious about the sudden visit. Senator Novikov's presence demanded attention. His reputation veterans' rights defender was well known. His arrival in the site was an extraordinary event and aroused interest. Senator Novikov entered the station with an air of imperturbable authority. His demeanor was calm but firm. He headed straight to the captain of the section. His request was simple but weighty. He wanted to meet the veteran who was waiting at the station. Officers, including Dmitry Petrov, watched closely happening. They realized the significance of the senator's visit. The disdainful attitude towards Victor now seemed wrong. The officers began to realize that Victor meant more than they assumed from the start. Senator Novikov approached Victor in the waiting room. In the room, there was silence as he greeted him warmly. In his eyes there was genuine respect. He recognized his service and the importance of his certificates. The officers watched, feeling the weight of their previous actions. The major accompanying Senator Novikov stepped forward. He explained the meaning of Victor's ID. It wasn't just certificate, but a symbol of his participation in secret operations. Victor was involved in missions that few people knew about. His service was worthy of praise, and his certificate was of particular importance. The officers listened attentively. They learned about Victor's past, about his contribution and the awards he earned. It was a moment realization for them. They realized the seriousness of their previous behavior and felt the weight of their oversight. Dmitry Petrov experienced mixed feelings. He was overcome confusion, regret, and humility. He did not recognize the importance Victor's presence. The laughter and ridicule that had been heard earlier now seemed stupid. Victor was more than just a man, awaiting ID renewal. Senator Novikov's presence was a powerful reminder. He addressed the officers, speaking about the importance of respect and understanding. The words were clear and direct. He emphasized the need to respect those who served, recognize their contributions, and treat them with respect the dignity they deserve. Victor remained calm throughout the entire interaction. There was no need to defend himself. His presence and his story spoke for themselves. He was grateful for the support of Senator Novikov, but he did not seek attention. His desire for a quiet life was obvious, even in the midst of unfolding events. The officers at the station were humbled. They realized that Victor's is one of many that often go unheard. His service and sacrifice were a reminder of the quiet dignity that are borne by those who served in silence. The officers understood the lesson of respect that Victor's presence presented them with. Senator Novikov's visit left an indelible impression. The officers saw firsthand the importance of understanding and respect. Updating Victor's ID has now become a priority, and it was treated with due respect. The officers received a valuable lesson in the importance of the stories behind each certificate. Dmitry Petrov, in particular, felt the need to apologize. He approached Victor with sincerity. The behavior weighed on him. He wanted to express his regret, apologize for your dismissive attitude. Victor listened to Dmitry Petrov's apology. His response was noble. He accepted the apology with a nod, the embodiment of dignity, acquired over the years of service. Victor's actions showed that respect is not always words, but understanding and recognition. While the police station was processing the renewal of Victor's ID, a thoughtful mood settled over the police station. The officers remembered the importance of recognizing the contributions of those who served. Visit Victor became part of the history of the site, a story that will be passed on by word of mouth as a lesson in respect. Senator Novikov's visit became a catalyst for change. Plot recognized the need for new training sessions. Now the focus was on recognition and respect for military service. The officers understood that in the future, interaction would have to be built on respect for those who served, so that every story is heard and respected. Victor's presence at the station left its mark. His quiet strength and patience reminded us of the dignity that those who served. He did not seek recognition, but his story deserved it, to be heard. The officers understood the importance of listening, recognition of the sacrifices made by those who served. When the station returned to its normal operations, officers retained the lesson learned from Victor's visit. They realized the importance of respect, recognizing the stories behind the man who entered the station. Victor's story testified to the power of patience, perseverance, and quiet forces. Dmitry Petrov, in particular, learned this lesson. He understood the importance of recognizing the contributions of those who served. Victor's visit changed his outlook, and he was determined to ensure that in the future, Interactions were based on respect for stories behind every ID card. The atmosphere in the area had changed. Respect and understanding were now in the center of every interaction. Victor's presence left an indelible mark, reminding everyone of the importance of listening and recognition of the sacrifices made by those who served. Victor's story was a testament to the strength of character that is born into a life dedicated to service. His visit to the station became a powerful reminder of the importance of respect, service, and dignity. His quiet presence left its mark on the precinct, and in the hearts of its employees is a legacy of respect and understanding that will continue to shape their future interactions. If you like this story, please like the video. The old veteran calmly looked after the territory of the military base. No one knew why he did it, and no one asked. But once the general arrived, and everything has changed. This story is not just about the gardener, this is a story about this promise and an unexpected past. Do not forget to subscribe. Tomorrow you will find an even more amazing video. Every morning, as soon as the first rays of the sun touched the earth, an elderly man named Alexander came to Fort MacArthur. His appearance was as unchanged as sunrise. Dressed in worn clothes with instruments in his hands, he went to the barracks. Alexander's face was covered with wrinkles, and his hands were traces of time and hard work. Alexander had a constant routine. He methodically pushed the old lawnmower, gently cutting the grass. After that, he collected garbage and tidied up the territory around the barracks. From day to day, he did it without passes. The young soldiers of the Fort MacArthur often saw Alexander. For them, he was just an eccentric old man, part of the landscape, like a tree that always grew in this place. Some soldiers made fun of him, calling him a gardener and wondering why he works for free. They did not understand why he came every day, working without any payment. Private Davis was one of such young soldiers. He noticed Alexander more often than others. Davis was a newcomer at the base and showed curiosity for everything around. He watched Alexander's work, reflecting on his history. Davis saw Alexander purposefully moving, how carefully he was treated with every detail. But Davis was often distracted, his colleagues joked at Alexander, and it was difficult for him to refrain from participating in these jokes. Nevertheless, something in Alexander intrigued him, and he could not get rid of the feeling that in this old man something more was hidden than it seems at first glance. Fort MacArthur was a busy place. The soldiers trained hard every day. They ran, worked out maneuvers, and prepared for tasks. The base was full of noise and energy. Tanks rumbled by, and sometimes helicopters flew over his head. Among all this activity, Alexander worked quietly. He seemed inappropriate, a figure from the past in the world of modern soldiers and cars. The soldiers of Fort MacArthur were young, ambitious, and enthusiastic. They trained to become leaders in order to serve their country with honor. They had big dreams and even more grandiose plans. For them, Alexander was just a reminder of the other time. They saw in him a relic of the past, someone who did not move on. Alexander did not mind. He continued his work day after day, concentrating on the task, haircut of grass and garbage harvesting. He was proud of his work, even if no one else seemed to notice this. His routine was important to him. He gave his day the structure and meaning. Private Davis often thought about approaching Alexander. He wanted to ask him about life, learn more about a person who works so tirelessly. But something kept him. Perhaps these were the jokes of his comrades, or maybe the old man's calm behavior, which made him impregnable. Once, passing by the barracks, Davis saw Alexander working near a small garden. The old man carefully torn weeds and looked after the plants. Davis stopped, watching him. He noticed with what care Alexander worked, how he treated each plant as if it were something important. Davis was about to speak when a group of his friends called him. They laughed and joked, and Davis felt that the moment was missed. He joined his friends, but his thoughts remained with Alexander. He wondered why the old man cares about the garden that most people ignored. The days went, and Davis's curiosity only grew. He began to question, trying to find out more about Alexander. He talked with some of the senior soldiers, hoping that they could shed light on a mysterious gardener. But most of them shrugged, saying that they know little about him. One evening, when Davis was sitting in the dining room, he heard a conversation. Two senior soldiers talked about Alexander. They mentioned that he has come to the base for many years. One of them said something about the fact that Alexander had long served in the army. Davis listened attentively. His interest increased. Was Alexander a soldier? This idea intrigued Davis. He introduced Alexander as a young man, possibly commander of the troops or fighting in battles. It was difficult to imagine, but Davis made such an opportunity even more curious. The next morning, Davis watched Alexander again. This time, he noticed something else. Alexander was in the old cap, faded from the sun. She looked like a military. Davis felt a surge of excitement. Maybe his guess was true? Maybe Alexander once served, like the soldiers of Fort MacArthur? But Alexander remained a mystery. He did not tell his story, and no one seemed to know her. The young soldiers continued to joke, and Davis was between curiosity and pressure from his peers. He wanted to know more, but also wanted to fit into the company of his friends. When the sun sat over the fort of MacArthur, Alexander finished his work. He packed the tools and left the barracks. His steps were slow but confident, and quiet dignity was felt in his posture. Davis watched him, experiencing a mixed sense of respect and curiosity. The presence of Alexander in Fort MacArthur was a mystery. He was an old man in the world of young soldiers. He worked without recognition, carefully caring for the territory, but there was something more in it than it seemed at first glance. Private Davis felt this, even if he had not yet fully understood. The days went, and Alexander continued to come to the base. He worked, as always, silently and concentrated. Young soldiers went about their business, training and preparing. They laughed and joked, often over Alexander. But among them was a man with a story, a man who lived a life full of events that they could only imagine. Alexander, the old gardener, was something more than just a strange element of the Fort MacArthur. He was part of his story, a connection with the past, which few recognized. Working every day, he kept his secrets, pleased that his actions speak for him. For ordinary Davis, the secret of Alexander was a challenge. He wanted to reveal the truth, to find out what made the old man return day after day. But for now, all he could do is observe and ask questions, hoping that one day he will find the answers he was looking for. Alexander's days in Fort MacArthur were filled with quiet work and silent thoughts. Caring after the territory, he often returned his thoughts to his past. He recalled his days in the army, the time when he was not just a gardener, but a commander. Many years ago, Alexander served with honor. He participated in many tasks and saw the world as few people have seen him. He led the soldiers in difficult situations, making difficult decisions and fearlessly meeting the danger. In those days, he proudly wore shape, and those who knew him respected his name. Alexander often thought about these times when he mowed the lawn or collected garbage. His thoughts returned to the past. He recalled the faces of the young soldiers with whom he commanded, their zeal and courage. He remembered the bonds formed in the heat of battles and the lessons extracted in the moments of the crisis. These memories were bright, as if everything had happened yesterday. Among all the memories, one stood out especially brightly. It was a memory of the promise that he gave his colleague, a friend who did not return from one of their tasks. They were close, passing shoulder to shoulder through many trials. Before that last task, Alexander's friend asked him to take care of others if something happened to him. It was a simple request, but it had great weight. Alexander promised to do this, and he intended to keep his promise. The territory of the Fort MacArthur was something more for Alexander than just grass and earth. Each blade of grass that he trimmed, every piece of garbage that he lifted was part of the fulfillment of this promise. He saw his work as a way to honor the memory of his friend and all the soldiers with whom he served. Caring for the base, he took care of the soldiers who called her their home. At the base, there was a small memorial, past which many young soldiers passed without noticing it. It was hidden in a quiet corner surrounded by several trees and flowers. Alexander took care of this memorial with particular care. He regularly cleaned him, making sure that he was always in a presentable form. For him, it was a sacred place, a reminder of the victims brought by those who served. The memorial was dedicated to the fallen soldiers, and Alexander felt a deep connection with him. He spent time there almost every day, lifting weeds and placing flowers. This was also part of his promise, a way to make sure that the victims of his friends and comrades will not be forgotten. Working, Alexander reflected on the soldiers whom he saw every day. They were young, full of energy and ambitions. They reminded him of himself when he was at their age. He understood their desire to serve, their desire to prove themselves. He once felt the same, but Alexander saw something else. He saw their inexperience, their misunderstanding of what the service actually means. He knew that training and teachings are taught a lot, but some lessons can be learned only from experience. He hoped that, caring for the base, he at least a little helps them. Private Davis continued to watch Alexander curiously. He noticed how the old man cares about the memorial, how he works with such devotion. Davis's respect for Alexander grew, although he still did not know the whole story. Once, when Alexander cut the grass near the memorial, Davis approached him. For a moment he hesitated, not knowing what to say, but he gathered in spirit and spoke. He asked Alexander why he cares so much about the memorial, why he works so hard every day. Alexander stopped and looked at Davis. There was silence before Alexander spoke. He did not reveal everything, but talked a little about his past. He mentioned this promise and the importance of memory of those who served. Davis listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized that in Alexander there is much more than he imagined. He thanked the old man and left, immersed in thought. Continuing the service in Fort MacArthur, Davis began to see things differently. He drew attention to the small details, which Alexander took care of, how the base looked better thanks to the efforts of the old man. Davis began to understand the value of Alexander's work, then the respect she deserved. The presence of Alexander in Fort MacArthur was a lesson in humility and devotion. He did not look for recognition or praise. He worked quietly, fulfilling his promise and honoring his past. His actions spoke louder words, students young soldiers to serve and devotion. The days turned into weeks, and Alexander continued his routine. He came to the base every morning, ready for work. His thoughts remained in the past, with the soldiers he knew and with the promise that he gave. He found reassurance in his work, knowing that he was holding back his word. The legacy of Alexander was not in medals or awards. It consisted of how he lived his life, in the care that he showed to the base and its inhabitants. He understood that true ministry is not recognition, but to do what is right even when no one was looking. For ordinary Davis, Alexander became an example to follow. The young soldier began to share what he found out with his peers, hoping to change their eyes at the old man. He talked about the past of Alexander, about the promise that directed his actions. Davis wanted others to see in Alexander not just a gardener, but a veteran who gave so much to his country. While the young soldiers of Fort MacArthur trained and prepared, Alexander began to spread the quiet influence of Alexander. His presence reminded them of the values that they sought to support, of the victims made by those who were before them. Gradually, jokes and dismissive remarks disappeared, replaced by respect and understanding. Alexander, an old man who worked tirelessly in Fort MacArthur, was something more than it seemed. His story was a history of service, sacrifice, and a restrained promise. With his actions, he taught young soldiers the true meaning of duty and honor, leaving a mark in their life, which will remain for a long time after his departure. The days passed, and among the soldiers of the fort, MacArthur began to walk about Alexander. Young men and women spoke in an undertone, interested in the old man who tirelessly worked every day. Alexander was no longer just a gardener, he became the subject of interest, a mystery that had to be solved. Private Davis was in the center of these discussions. His meeting with Alexander aroused his interest, and he shared the few that he knew with others. Davis described Alexander's loyalty and hinted at his last military service. His words were made by the soldiers even more curious, and soon they wanted to learn more about the man who seemed to keep the secrets of another time. One afternoon, Davis decided to dig the past of Alexander more deeply. Driven by curiosity, he went to a small base library. There he found old military entries and newspapers that could contain the keys to a solution. He began with records, hoping to find the name of Alexander among many soldiers who served. The task was not easy. There were a lot of records, and the real name of Alexander, André, was common. Davis spent the clock, reading documents, looking for any mention of the person whom he began to respect. Looking through the pages, he felt determination. He wanted to bring together the story of Alexander, to understand a person who became a quiet symbol of devotion in Fort MacArthur. After some time, Davis discovered a mention of Andrew in an old newspaper article. The article told about the brave officer who played a key role in the military operation many years ago. It described his leadership qualities and courage, emphasized his actions that saved many lives. Davis's heart clogged more often when he read the article. Can this be the same person who is now caring for the territory of the base? This thought excited him. He felt that he was opening a hidden head of history, a story that should be told. Davis continued his research, collecting grains of information. He talked with old veterans at the base, asking if they know anything about Alexander's past. Some recalled André many years ago, a person known for his courage and leadership qualities. They talked about tasks and conflicts, about the time when Alexander was formed and served with honors. As the pieces of the puzzles consisted together, Davis realized that Alexander was indeed the same person from the article. He was a hero, a respected figure in the army. And yet, he was here, working quietly, not looking for recognition or praise. This discovery filled Davis with admiration and respect. The news about Davis's find spread among soldiers. The story of Alexander became a topic for conversations, and the young soldiers began to see him in a new light. The jokes and ridicule stopped, replaced by a sense of respect for a person who once served with such valor. Once, when Alexander worked near the memorial, a young soldier approached him. The soldier thanked Alexander for the service, expressing gratitude for his past actions. Alexander was taken by surprise. He nodded silently, accepting gratitude, but said little in response. This meeting made Alexander think. He realized that his story is no longer a secret. Young soldiers began to see deeper, understand a person standing behind a quiet job. Alexander felt peace. He did not seek recognition, but was grateful for the understanding and respect that he received. The days went, and the presence of Alexander in Fort MacArthur acquired a new meaning. He was no longer just an old man who kept the territory clean. He was a symbol of devotion and service, a reminder of the values that the soldiers sought to support. Private Davis felt satisfaction. He played his role in the disclosure of Alexander's history, in the science of light on the legacy of a person who gave so much. Davis continued to share the history of Alexander with others, hoping to inspire his peers with the lessons of humility and devotion that Alexander embodied. The story of Alexander spread beyond the limits of the fort of MacArthur. The news reached other bases, and soon Alexander became known as a veteran who quietly served his country more than anyone could imagine. His actions in the Fort MacArthur were considered as a lesson in leadership, a reminder of the importance of ministry without a search for glory. For young soldiers, Fort MacArthur, the story of Alexander became a lesson in respect and understanding. They learned to look beyond appearance, see value in actions and not in words. The legacy of Alexander became part of their training, a reminder of the victims made by those who served before them. Alexander continued his work, carefully caring for the territory and memorial. His days were the same as before, filled with quiet deeds and thoughts. But the way he was perceived, the soldiers greeted him with respect, recognizing a man who became a significant part of their life. Private Davis often watched Alexander's work, experiencing a sense of gratitude for the lessons he received. Alexander showed him the value of devotion, fulfilling promises and veneration of the past. Davis knew that these lessons would remain with him, directing him in his own military career. The history of Alexander continued to spread along the Fort MacArthur. His past as a rewarded military officer was now known among soldiers. They no longer saw in him just an old man who mows the lawn. Instead, they respected him for devotion to the cause and the heritage that he carried in himself. But not everyone was satisfied with the current situation. The colonel heard about Alexander. He was worried about safety and compliance with the rules on the basis. Alexander came and left without any official permission, and this bothered the colonel. He decided that it was time to deal with this issue. One morning, when Alexander pushed his lawnmower along the barracks, two military police officers approached him. They were polite but firm. They asked Alexander to go to the security department with them. Alexander nodded, understanding their duty, and implicitly followed them. The colonel was waiting in the security department. He looked at Alexander, seeing in him not just an old man, but the one who became part of the everyday life of the base. The colonel explained that although everyone appreciates the work of Alexander, they need to ensure that the security protocols are ensured. He asked Alexander to provide an identity card and indicate the purpose of his daily stay at the base. Alexander listened in silence. He explained that he had come to Fort MacArthur for many years, caring for the territory in order to fulfill the promise given to the deceased comrade. He did not have existing documents, but he showed them an old military identity card issued several decades ago. It was shaved and faded, a relic of another time. The colonel understood the meaning of Alexander's actions, but remained adamant. There are rules on the basis, and they must be observed. He told Alexander that without appropriate documents, he could not continue his work on the basis. This was a difficult decision, but it was necessary for security reasons. Alexander nodded. He understood the position of the colonel, even if it meant that he could no longer fulfill his promise as before. Leaving the office, Alexander asked if he could visit the memorial for the last time. The colonel agreed, and the military police accompanied Alexander to the memorial. At the memorial, Alexander stood in silence. He felt a wave of emotions, recalling his friend and a promise given to him. Alexander took a sheet of paper from his pocket and wrote a note. He laid it at the base of the memorial, leaving a piece of his heart there. It was his way to say goodbye, for the last time to fulfill his promise. When Alexander was preparing to leave the base, Private Davis approached him. Davis heard about what had happened and felt that he had to speak out. He knew Alexander's story and believed in the importance of the old man's presence in Fort MacArthur. Davis turned to the colonel with a request, explaining that Alexander is more than just a gardener. He is a symbol of devotion, ministry, and inspiration for young soldiers. Other soldiers joined Davis, expressing their support to Alexander. They talked about his past, about the lessons that they learned from his quiet example. The words of the soldiers made a split into the ranks, dividing those who appreciated the rules and those who appreciated the legacy of Alexander. The colonel listened to the soldier. He respected their opinion, but reminded them of the importance of security. The rules exist for a reason, and they must be observed. Despite the requests of the soldiers, Alexander had to leave. Alexander left Fort MacArthur quietly, with his head proudly raised. He understood the situation and did not hold on anyone evil. He did everything possible to fulfill his promise. And now, it's time to move on. Leaving the base, he felt peace. He knew that his actions were not in vain, that he changed the lives of young soldiers. On the basis of Private Davis, he experienced mixed feelings. He was proud of his colleagues for stood up for Alexander, but at the same time was saddened by the outcome. He knew that Alexander's influence would remain, even if the old man was no longer there. The note that Alexander left at the memorial was found later on the same day. She was a simple but strong reminder of his promise. The words touched those who read them, increasing the influence that Alexander had on the base. In the following days, the soldiers of Fort MacArthur continued their service, but something changed in the air. The absence of Alexander was felt, and his story remained in the memory of young soldiers. They recalled his devotion, his quiet power, and lessons that he taught him. Private Davis took the obligation to continue to tell the story of Alexander. He spoke with the recruits, telling them about the old man who once walked around the territory with a lawnmower and a promise. Davis wanted to preserve Alexander's legacy so that his actions would not be forgotten. The colonel also reflected on the situation. He realized that, although the rules are important, the stories and heritage of those who served are also important. He began to ponder the ways to honor the contribution of Alexander, to recognize the value of his quiet ministry. The departure of Alexander from the fort, MacArthur, marked the end of one chapter, but also opened the door for new beginnings. His legacy lived in the hearts of the soldiers, testifying to the power of devotion and humility. Alexander left his mark on the base, and his story continued to inspire those who followed in his footsteps. A few weeks after Alexander departed from the Fort MacArthur, the news spread that the general was going to come on a visit. The general was a respected leader and served in the army for many years. The soldiers were excited and a little nervous about his visit. They were preparing for the inspection, making sure that everything was in order. Private Davis, like other soldiers, was busy with preparation, but he also remembered something important. He heard that the general and Alexander were possibly familiar. This connection intrigued him, and he hoped that this could lead to something positive for Alexander. On the day of the visit in Fort MacArthur, activity was in full swing. The soldiers stood in even rows. Their shape was impeccable, and the boots were polished to shine. The base was clean and tidy, testifying to the hard work they did. Everyone sought to make a good impression. The general arrived in the morning. He got out of the car and was met by a colonel. Two men exchanged greetings and courtesies before starting the inspection. The general walked through the base, watching the soldiers in their training grounds. Moving around the base, the general noticed a memorial, which Alexander carefully cared about. He stopped to read the inscriptions and look at the flowers neatly placed around. The general asked the colonel about the memorial, becoming interested in his history and the care of him. The colonel explained that the memorial is dedicated to the fallen soldiers. He mentioned that an old veteran named Alexander looked after him for many years. The general listened carefully. His interest in history increased. Private Davis, standing nearby, saw an opportunity. He went to the general and the colonel and introduced himself. Davis respected Alexander's story, telling the general about the devotion of the old man and the promise he had held. He explained how the quiet service of Alexander inspired young soldiers. The general listened carefully. Recognition appeared in his eyes when Davis spoke. The general remembered André many years ago. They served together, and André was a respected commander. Hearing about the continued service of Alexander, the general was deeply touched. After the inspection, the general asked for a personal meeting with the colonel. At the meeting, the general expressed his admiration to Alexander and the disappointment that Alexander was asked to leave. He understood the need for rules, but believed that for such a person as Alexander, who gave so much, an exception can be made. The general decided to act. He asked the colonel to organize a meeting with Alexander, wanting to personally thank him for devotion. The general believed that Alexander's story deserves to be recognized and noted. The next day, the invitation was sent to Alexander. This was an official request to return to Fort MacArthur to meet with the general. Alexander, with surprise, but also gratefully accepted the invitation. He did not expect such a gesture, but he was glad to find out that his efforts did not go unnoticed. When Alexander arrived at Fort MacArthur to meet, he was met with respect. The soldiers who once joked him now looked at him with admiration. Alexander entered the negotiation room, where he was waiting for the general and colonel. The meeting was touching. The general warmly greeted Alexander, expressing his gratitude for his service, both in the past and in the Fort of MacArthur. Two men talked about the past, sharing stories about their days in the army. Alexander explained his promise to his deceased comrade and why he decided to serve quietly. The general listened with respect, recognizing the depth of Alexander's devotion. He realized that Alexander's actions were not just in caring for the territory, but in reverence for promises and heritage. The general thanked Alexander for his tireless work and an example that he gave to the young soldiers. With the support of the colonel, the general decided to hold the ceremony in honor of Alexander. It was a chance to officially note his contribution and share his history with the entire base. The general believed that Alexander's legacy should be noted by an inspiration for future generations. Alexander was touched by this gesture. He never looked for recognition, but was grateful for the opportunity to share his story. He hoped that the ceremony would remind the soldiers of the values that he cherished: devotion, humility, and the importance of fulfilling promises. While preparing for the ceremony was going on, the base was filled with a feeling of excitement. The soldiers were looking forward to the opportunity to honor Alexander, trying to express their respect for a person who became a symbol of service and self-sacrifice. The ceremony was to become the opportunity to reflect on the legacy of Alexander and confirm the values that he embodied. Private Davis experienced a sense of pride. He played a role in telling the story of Alexander, and he was glad to see that the old man receives a well-deserved recognition. Davis knew that Alexander's story would continue to inspire the soldier, Fort MacArthur, reminding him of the true meaning of service. Preparation for the ceremony was teamwork. The soldiers worked together to make sure that everything is perfect, from the arrangement of places to jewelry. They wanted to make sure that the event was almost Alexander as he deserves. As the day of the ceremony approached, Alexander was thinking about his path. He thought about his friend, about his promise, and about the years that he spent fulfilling him. Alexander felt peace, knowing that his actions changed the lives of young soldiers. The ceremony was supposed to be a new beginning, not only for Alexander, but for the entire Fort MacArthur. It was a chance to celebrate the values that Alexander lived and ensure that his heritage continues to inspire those who would follow in his footsteps. The day of the ceremony came, bringing with it a feeling of anticipation to the Fort MacArthur. The soldiers gathered early, their shape was neat, and the mood is raised. The ceremony was a special event, the opportunity to honor Alexander and the legacy that he left at the base. The chairs were neatly placed in front of the memorial, behind which Alexander so carefully looked after. A podium was installed, a small scene was prepared for performances. Respect and admiration reigned in the atmosphere when the soldiers were preparing to celebrate the contribution of a man who quietly served him. Alexander arrived at the base, where he was warmly welcomed by soldiers and officers. Among them was an ordinary Davis, striving to express his gratitude to the man who so inspired him. Alexander felt humility, looking around and seeing the faces of young soldiers who came to honor him. The general climbed the podium to start the ceremony. He spoke about Alexander's service, both during his military career and during his stay in the forte of MacArthur. The general emphasized Alexander's loyalty and the promise given to him by his deceased comrade. His words painted a portrait of a man who lived his life in ministry and self-sacrifice, always setting others higher than himself. Alexander listened in silence. His heart was crowded with emotions. He never looked for recognition, but was grateful for the opportunity to share his story. The general's words were evidence of the values that Alexander cherished, and he hoped that they would inspire young soldiers to support the same values. After the general's speech, it was the turn of Alexander to turn to the soldiers. He stood behind the catwalk, experiencing a mixed feeling of excitement and gratitude. Alexander was not used to speaking to a large audience, but he knew that this was an important moment. He began by thanking the soldier for their support and respect for him. Alexander shared stories from his past, recalling tasks and friends who formed his life. He spoke about his promise to a friend, explaining how it directed his actions over the years. Alexander's words were simple but strong. He talked about the importance of devotion, humility, and fulfilling promises. He reminded the soldiers that true service is something more than just wearing a form. We are talking about life with honesty and honor. The soldiers listened carefully, absorbing the lessons that Alexander drew up for his long life of the service.